van der Spuy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Block Markets Africa. And I'll start by telling you that open source is a really good idea. I built my career as a 19-year-old publishing an open source class to access my SQL tables through CRUD. So I didn't have to write all the commands again. And I open sourced that class, and at the same time I submitted it to my computer science teacher, and he failed me. But 6,500 people downloaded my class, and I had a .co.za email address, and suddenly I had 3 big companies sending me contracts to do PHP development. So open source is a really good idea, and it's something we strongly believe in. And Web3 is one of the most exciting things in my mind for open source, because we're able to write software, business processes for money. And this to me is one of the most exciting things that you can do as a software engineer, because what we've seen in the world today is that it's normally just, I don't know if this, can you guys hear me or am I breaking up? It's normally just the banks that have control over the payment systems. But Web3 gives us as software developers the ability to write our own applications on money. And this is the really fantastic thing that's starting. Now,
we can hear you without the...
So what I want to talk about is, how do we level the playing field? How do we give everybody fair access to the money system? That's the big idea. So the first thing we've got to understand is that the money system is based on this thing called clearing and settlement in financial market infrastructure. And no, it's not about updating a table and saying 1 + 1 on this, incrementing that, and then decrementing on the other side. Unfortunately, it's a lot more involved in that. But the biggest problem in clearing and settlement is that it's little old boys clubs. And if you don't belong to the right system, you can't transact. But in our world, we think of ourselves as not having access to the banking system. But did you know that African banks don't have access to the global banking system? They need to have a partnership with a global bank in order to touch the dollar system. There's no actual dollars in Africa, aside from the ones flying around Zimbabwe. The only digital dollars that live here are fake dollars. They are liabilities or debts that are issued by African institutions. And those African institutions must have accounts with banks overseas, because the global market doesn't believe we're okay to transact in dollars directly. That's Africa. Welcome to Africa. So even our banks are disenfranchised the same way we as developers are disenfranchised from our own payment system. So these things makes banking and payments resistant to innovation, because those who have access have no reason to innovate, because their access is protected. If we could open up access, we can bring everybody in to innovate and solve the problems that we see in Africa. But the banks don't have the budget, and the bank's biggest problem is they have to pay dividends for their shareholders. It's not about serving the depositor more effectively. Now, I work with a lot of banks, and there's good people in banks, but banks are not the entity that's going to change the world. It's going to be us. So right now, there's an alternative payment system already happening. In just the second quarter, from March to June of this year, the transactions in stablecoins are starting to eclipse the biggest transactions in the banking systems in the world. This is completely open, permissionless money. It's USDT and USDC type of transactions in Web3. And you know what? These guys are fighting with one of their hands, maybe both of their hands tied behind their back, because what they need you to do is know what a private key is. What they need you to do is to know how to switch from your local currency to dollars. What they need to do is to teach you how to access a crypto exchange account before you can start. And those things are hard, and yet people are doing it. About 30 to 40 billion US dollars have left the African banking system and gone into USDT alone over the last few years, because it's offering a better way for payments. Web3 is offering a better way for payments for a massively growing audience around the world. 220 million wallets are holding US dollar stablecoins around the world. That's bigger than the biggest banks. Just the number of customers. And if you don't pay attention to these numbers, this wave is going to come, and it's going to say hello to you in your castle soon enough. The biggest biggest issue we need to accept here is that there's three big audiences that's trying to use new Web3 technology to do payments. The one audience is the banks, and they just do it for the banks. They don't want to include anybody else in the system. The other one is central banks, and they're doing it because they want to figure out how CBDCs work, and by the way, nobody's figured it out yet because there's a lot of economic challenges with that. And the last one is the stablecoin providers who are just setting up their own system, and their biggest problem is making stablecoins pay for stuff like bread and coffee and paying for my utility bills and sending money to my cousin, which is the least common denominator type of services. So what we believe is that it's time for a regulated Web3 payment system. Now I'm saying two words that don't really gel with each other, Web3 and regulated. But you can actually regulate Web3 activity effectively. South Africa has launched a crypto asset service provider license from the regulator that you can apply for. You can become a licensed financial service provider in Africa, in South Africa specifically, and legally transact with digital currencies for your customers. And this is a groundbreaking advantage, especially here in Cape Town, in Africa, where so many great blockchain engineers already live. And we have a unique opportunity to use this infrastructure to build a unified shared ledger. What I do every single day of my life is I try and convince great people like you to join a unified shared ledger. And I've convinced some really big companies already to do this. I'm not allowed to name everybody's names, but some big tier 1 banks, some big tier 1 exchanges, some big tier 1 asset managers, payment processors are all joining this ecosystem because they realize they can make better money than doing it the old way. It's not threatening them. It's showing them that they can get a better result if they implement into an open ecosystem. Because open is better for everybody. It's not about just the few having access. We all should have access. The great thing about a unified shared ledger is that it does more than just payments. It can do investments. It can do cross-border remittance. It can do savings products. It can do property. It has the ability to give you a regulated digital identity on this ledger. Every single one of us can have an identity on this ledger that's regulated, in which we can hold our day-to-day assets and we can pay with our rand currency or our cedi currency or our nairas or our shillings or our kwachas or our pulas or whatever the currency is that we want to use. We don't always have to go from our local currency into a cryptocurrency because we can create cryptocurrencies that are in our local currency. I'm going to get to a quick slide here. How would we do this? There's 4 things that we believe is important. And I'm going very high level today. The first is we create an open ledger that we all can participate in that's regulated. What does it mean? You must be a licensed FSP to write to the ledger, but everyone can look at the ledger. Now, licensed FSPs are a lot more than just the banks, so it's a big leap forward. The reason why it should be licensed FSPs is because there are reasons for the rules around payment systems. We want to protect against fraud. We want to protect against money laundering. We want to make sure that people, when they put their money into the system, don't lose their money. That's why it should be a licensed financial service provider that has access to this ledger. But that licensed service provider should be able to help every user and every business to transact on that ledger. And they should be able to do that with any form of currency. That's how we bring real-world assets into this ledger. I'm not going to talk tonight about the complicated legal structures, but suffice it to say that we can bring anything from the real world legally into this ledger today. For those that are very, very clever, this is how we do it. Take a photo. The way in which you can construct this is using something called an on-common deed partnership structure. It's basically a really smart stokvel, or SACCO, for those who's not from South Africa. And we can use these legal structures as us coming together and doing things to actually buy real-world assets and fractionalize it and tokenize it. And those instruments then live on this open ledger. And what we're able to do with that is we can buy the same things the banks buy to back their money. And if we can collectively buy the same thing the banks buy to back the money the banks give us, then why is our money any worse than what the bank gives us? And this idea of using a tokenized real-world asset as the thing that backs the money that we use and putting that on the network so we can all see that it's really there. We don't have to worry whether the bank hasn't got the money to pay us because we can see the token on-chain, backing the payment instrument on-chain. That allows us to create something that hasn't been thought of before. It allows us to create something called a multi-issuer payment token. What is a multi-issuer payment token? It means it's money that we can all issue. Any licensed financial service provider can issue the same money as what the banks issue. This means that a licensed financial service provider buying the same thing that the banks buy to reserve it can use that asset, that reserve, to deposit into a community escrow pool structure on-chain. For those who don't understand smart contracts, it's a really cool collateral contract. It takes one unit and it spits out another unit. It takes in the money market fund reserve asset that we buy and it spits out a payment token called an EZAR. And every licensed FSP is allowed to do this, not just the banks. Now what's exciting is this EZAR. This EZAR is the common instrument that we can all use. This EZAR can go from me to Dieter, it can go from me to Sanlam, it can go from me to Shoprite, it can go from me to Vodacom, it can go from me to Singapore, because its reserve asset is high quality money. It's the same stuff the banks are ultimately using to back their money. That is the great breakthrough. That means that we, as developers, can get crypto asset service provider licenses and do this for our customers. And we're no longer restricted from touching the payment system because we're complying with the licenses that the Reserve Bank has asked us to comply with. And you'd be surprised at how eager the banking institutional industry is actually about bringing this on board. Not the banks, but the banking institutional industry. The payment processors, the bank serve teams, the Banking Association of South Africa, the Payments Association of South Africa. And the idea fundamentally is that if I issue a token and NA issues a token, then our customers can trade these tokens between each other with no friction. Instantly, freely, and completely safe. Nobody loses their money because it's always backed by the same stuff that backs the bank's money. And this idea couldn't be possible without blockchain technology, because I need to be able to keep an eye on the EZAR that everybody else has issued to check that the reserves that everybody else has bought matches each other. I don't want there to be 10 reserve units and 100 EZAR, because then it's not properly reserved. It should be 100 to 100. And the blockchain gives us this transparency to see what's going on. That ultimately is where we need great people like yourselves to learn Solidity smart contracts, to be able to build APIs, to be able to integrate into applications, and every business in our country and in Africa will be able to offer this new kind of money to everyone. Did I tell you the best news? These wallets cost nothing. They cost nothing to create, they cost a private key. These wallets cost nothing to maintain. They're a private key. These wallets hold money that pays interest. It pays the same returns that the banks are making. And it enables us as licensed FSPs to be able to access the payment system and build a business model that earns the way the bank earns, on the reserves of our customers. So we can afford to offer free payments to people because our money is made on the reserve. It's not made on the transaction fee. And we can afford to maintain accounts for our customers because we make money on the reserves with them. We don't have to charge account fees, we don't have to charge opening fees, and we don't have to charge maintenance fees, and we don't have to charge transaction fees. And that is what an open payment system can start. Access to money for everyone. That's safe, that's secure, that's regulated, and guess what? This is legal today in South Africa. There's already 40 financial service providers that are participating in this ecosystem today. And if you'd like to know more about that, you're welcome to give Tiffany a shout and connect with me after. I'm out of time, everybody. Any questions?
I got a question. You said they earn interest. It's simple or compound?
It's compound interest. Because a money market fund is actually a compound interest vehicle, do you know what money market funds own? They own debt from the banks. They own cash and they own central bank debt. And those are priced daily by an asset manager. So you actually earn interest every day. The interest is actually paid to your wallet every single day. And the rate is really good. It's better what you get at the bank most of the time. Any other questions?
I got one more question.
You're welcome.
How do systems like this avoid getting hacked?
Ooh, so smart contracts and private key structures are very, very good at managing that. So smart contracts have to be audited. The source code is published and peer reviewed. And obviously, look, we stay away from zero knowledge proofs because ZK proofs, there's 5 people in the world that sort of understand it, and I don't know if they understand everything. I'm worried about the 15-year-old Chinese guy figuring something out a year from now. And then all my zero knowledge proofs goes to rubbish. But it's very, very secure, it's peer reviewed, and it's able to stand up to market audits. Just remember open source, where I started my conversation. These Solidity smart contracts are open source. Anyone can see what the rules are. Everyone can check for themselves. You have to understand Solidity smart contracts, unfortunately, but I'm talking to software developers, aren't I? You should be able to read that code yourself with a little bit of work. Any other questions?
You said something about transaction freedom. How can basically transaction
This shared unified ledger, it has gas, but because it's run by licensed FSPs, there is no gas fee. So you can actually, the licensed FSPs don't pay for the gas. As long as they comply with the regulatory requirements of the network, of the arrangement, they can have as much gas as they want. So this enables business models to give free microtransactions, and then the FSPs charge on larger transactions and other transactions like swaps between currencies, and they get a share of the return on reserves. And those transactions, they pay to the network on a contract about 15% of what they charge you. So if it costs you R1 to transact for 100,000 Rand transaction, 15 cents of that will go to the network instead of a gas fee, and 85 cents of that R1 fee goes to the licensed FSP. So you don't have to worry about gas being more expensive tomorrow and cheaper, but you also don't have to worry about the minimum $2 fee on a transaction on the blockchain, because you can do free microtransactions. I sent 1 cent from Cape Town to Krugersdorp this morning, and it would happen instantly, and it was free. Last questions. I'm out of time, guys.
Sorry, I came late, but is that the software that is integrated, or because we have the licensing, so I just want to know.
Do you have a CASP license?
Yeah.
Please connect with Tiffany to get my details, because what we do is we help those who have the CASP licenses, how you can fast track your business in this space.
We have CASP and FSCA.
That's the CASP one, the FSCA, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority.
Crypto assets.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the license you need.
I want to know about. Is it the software or what? I can let you list some of it. So.
Buddy, I don't have 18 minutes to repeat my talk, unfortunately. But please get my details. I can answer those questions, or you can check out the website Tiffany will be able to give you as well. It's an arrangement. Sorry, I don't know if I could do this in less time than I already did. I was surprised I finished on time. Everyone, I think I'm out of time. I don't want to eat into the time of the next person. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully you're encouraged. The world is changing. Web3 is the future. Developers are writing programmable money, and the businesses we're going to build is going to be amazing. We're going to solve the problems that our country and our continent has, because we care about the people that live next to us. That's the way in which we're going to fix this land. So I'm very, very excited to work with anyone that wants to build good solutions for money problems. There's an open infrastructure we can all participate in. Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys.